William, will you hit the lights for us, brother? We are ready to go. I know we are a couple of minutes late, but yeah. And then 4 should be the next one. It should come up. Yeah, look at that. Look at these guys. They look great. Thank you, everybody. We are so excited for another event of the Conversation Coalition. We've been doing this since July of last year. We always really have a fun time. Our whole purpose for being here is to have difficult conversations, and I don't think these guys are shy about disagreeing with each other. So we are going to have a pretty intense dialogue, I think, tonight. But I'm hoping what you'll find is not vitriol or hatred in this dialogue. What you're going to find are two friends that really just want to learn from each other. And that's really what we're all about. So half of us in the conversation, yes, thank you. I love that. Half of us in the Conversation Coalition are atheists. The other half are Christians. All of us are here in the Middle Tennessee area, which is great. So we do this every month. It is the last Thursday of every month. You can also find all of these wonderful conversations on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our Twitter or X profile, whatever you want to call it, Elon. But I don't want to take up too much more time. I want to start just with both of you. And what I'm going to do is just mainly try to let them talk and just hash it out for y'all. And when we're done, after about an hour here, we will go into 30 minutes of questions from y'all. So please think of really difficult questions. And then take a second, think about that question, and go, no, I could make it more difficult, because that's what we want. So to start off, let's go to you, Aaron. And I think, to begin this conversation about worldviews, a good place to start off, and give us a little introduction as well, but what does worldview mean to you, and what is your worldview?
So I'm a Christian. I have been my whole life. I was blessed to be raised in a Christian home. I got saved in the 2nd grade. So that's been my upbringing since the beginning. Now, what kind of led me here is that in the last 3 or 4 years, I started really critically exploring what it meant to be a Christian and how that weaves its way into my everyday life. When I think of worldview, a worldview is a network of beliefs that inform the way you engage the world, or the way you bump around the world is guided by your worldview. I think a lot of people, I'll draw this distinction, I think a lot of people think that their worldview is built on evidence, and I think that's actually the opposite way to think about it. I think that worldview determines how you understand the world. How you would even think about evidence were it presented to you is going to be filtered through your worldview. If you have on red glasses, the world looks red. If you have on blue glasses, the world looks blue. Now, do worldviews change? Yeah, but I think it's monumental when they change. I think it's rare. And when they do change, now the way I understand the world changes along with it. So that's what I think of a worldview.
I would agree with that. The way that you view the world shapes how you operate in it. I'm an atheist, so I don't believe in any God or gods. And many atheists try to take the easy way out and say, atheism is not a worldview. And I understand that. But I'm also willing to move in a little bit deeper and say it does influence how I see the world. I don't believe in a heaven or a hell. I don't believe in angels or demons or spirits or souls or chakras or cheese or auras or any of that. What I do believe in is gravity and biology and science and the things that we can test and that we can prove and that we can peer review. I believe in those things, but I don't believe in any of the supernatural claims. How that affects my worldview, like I said, I don't see any of those things. So I see what we actually have in front of us. And since I don't think that we're going anywhere, it makes this life more precious to me, and the time that we spend here very meaningful. So
you mentioned, you brought up a couple of different things that you said you don't believe in, and some things that you did believe in. And I guess one question that comes to my mind is, do you think that because of your worldview, you said you were an atheist, because of that worldview, is that why you believe in some things and don't believe in others? Or do you think because of your beliefs that gave you the worldview that you have? Which is chicken, egg first, I guess, kind of.
Well, I was a Christian for many years, and then I started questioning some things. Does my atheism cause me to believe certain things? I would say to a certain degree. I don't believe in any supernatural or any magic or yes. So when something's presented to me, it comes down to a matter of plausibility and believability, and is it demonstrative? Can I prove that in any way? I know there's things out there that you can't prove. You can't prove love. Aaron, you and I have talked about, I can't go out there in the world and find the number 7 or, things like that. And I get that. But no, I think that I believe what's in front of me. I don't think it goes a whole lot deeper than that.
Same question to you, Aaron.
Can I press on that a little bit?
Yeah, please. No, please.
So would you say it's fair that your presuppositions about the natural world, in other words, that you believe in science and empiricism and that, and I think you've said to me, you didn't say it right there, but you have a naturalistic outlook, then affects how you interpret any evidence of the supernatural. In other words, if I said, let me tell you about this miracle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We have had this conversation. I told you about this woman that I believe wholeheartedly, and that her hand was healed. And what was the first place your mind went?
Yeah, immediately I look to see if people are under any kind of a misapprehension, if there's some bit of missing information, if there's something that they just didn't understand at the time. It's easy to be fooled by different things. When I was growing up, there was a lady that was blind, and of course, after going to some doctors, getting some treatment and that kind of stuff, and of course, a lot of prayer, she woke up one morning and could see again. And of course, everybody in the church thought that was a miracle, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, what about the doctors? What about the treatments? What about all those things? And they discount all of that, but instead say, no, because we prayed, it happened. It's a miracle. So yeah, in that way, when someone says that they witnessed a miracle or they have evidence of a miracle, I do begin very skeptically. Absolutely. Yeah.
So then you can see how, or can you see how, presenting evidences for our different worldviews kind of becomes secondary, because it's not really, when we have a conversation, it's not an evidence issue. Not always. Sometimes it can be. Most of the time, I would say it's not an evidence issue, but it's a clash of worldviews, right? Because even when I present evidence, even though you trust me, right? Even though I present the evidence, it gets filtered through the worldview, and that tends to dictate how we interact with it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm okay with okay saying I walk through the world generally not believing in miracles. I'm totally fine with that.
And that's right. And that's why I think actually engaging the worldview from a high level is where you're going to find constructive conversation, because for every expert, there's an equal and opposite expert, right? And if we sat here and we were talking about the age of the earth and we were throwing back scientific evidence, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you this young earth worldview and you're going to give me an old earth worldview, and we're just going to present the exact same evidence from two different worldviews.
I know. You've brought that up a few times, and I get that you've got some scientists that say some things and they disagree with the larger body of scientists. I don't think the scientists at Answers in Genesis and the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter and all that, if they would publish a paper, if they would submit themselves to some peer review, if they would let other people, and the thing is, they do, and the rest of the scientific community shuts them down, and they tell them all the flaws and why things don't work, and they're just indignant, and they're just, they close their ears and they don't want to hear it. So just because you've got a scientist that says a thing, and I've got a scientist that says a thing, I don't think those are equal at all. There's a lot of peer review that goes into these things before something is accepted as scientific.
Well, I'll push back on that a little bit, because I know for a fact that these gentlemen have the same degrees, went to the same colleges, do the same research, see the same data, and come to different conclusions. They're not dumb, right? They went to Harvard, they went to Cambridge, they've done the work.
That's not the important part.
But hold on. Research journals that don't have a biblical foundation for the science that they're doing also have a worldview. The people that run those research journals, this is very important to me, are not neutral. They have a worldview. And so this type of research gets discounted before it even gets a chance to be reviewed or published. That's why these gentlemen had to get together and put together their own peer-reviewed journals, right? And so the Answers Journal, the Creation Research Journal, and immediately, right, they're not real scientists. This is the worldview coming into play. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the worldview coming into play, because immediately in your mind, they're not real scientists, right? So we go straight to delineating between, if you don't agree with mainstream science, you're not a real scientist. And I know you didn't say that, but your face says a lot.
So
I'm sure it does.
Real quick, if I could jump in.
I just feel like, hang on one second. I just feel like their degree does not matter a great deal. The guy that graduated at the bottom of the class in medical school is still called doctor. So just because they've got some letters behind their name, or that doesn't, they still need to, if they've got an opinion about something, they still need to submit it, let the rest of the community check it out.
But they do.
And if they get shot down, they get shot down.
They do.
Well, you just said when they get shot down, then we'll just start our own journal. We'll just publish ourselves.
I didn't say they get shot down. I said they don't get reviewed. Like, it's not that they get reviewed and shot down.
So,
it's not taken serious.
So if I can real quick, because it sounds like even though both of you admittedly have fairly different worldviews, there seems to be a space that both of your worldviews sit in, and it seems to be this scientific space. So I guess the first question, would you say that scientific evidence, the scientific process, just science in general, is that important in your worldview? And then I guess why? What is the importance?
Yeah, I think science is important as long as it's done with a biblical framework, And I know that the first response is that there's bias in that, and to be honest with you, everybody has bias, and I think it's more constructive to understand your bias, to admit it, to know it, and then to understand why you're thinking the way you're thinking. When I see someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson talk about scientists being these neutral, like, arbiters of truth, it's just not true. Like, they have the same things I got. They got family, they got jobs, they got egos, they've got funding they got to get, they've got life work, right?
But that doesn't mean they put out false information.
I don't think they're put out false information. What I'm saying is that the way they understand the information is based on their worldview. One of the biggest changes I had in my relationship with science, my understanding, because I love science, I'm definitely a STEM-minded guy, is when I first realized the difference between data and interpretation. When I realized that, and it's with the science of origins, right? I mean, there's some things like gravitational constants or, whatever, physics application that works all the time no matter what, and that's why we can put a man on the moon, and that's what makes my cell phone work. That's fine. I'm not talking about that. It's mostly historical science where we get into this inference to the best explanation, and we're trying to figure out what's going on in the past based on the present, right? That's really where the hang-up is. And I started to realize, like, there's data and then there's interpretation. Like, I know you have radiometric dating, but I also know that 2 of the 4 variables are unknown and that you're assuming them based on other conditions that you don't know. And so you have perhaps an upper age limit of, this sample, but that's different than actual fact that it is a thing. right? And that's what I mean. There's data, and then there's interpretation of data. And interpretation of data comes from your worldview, and just no one is immune to it. Nobody.
But you say you love science. You don't believe in evolution. You believe in a young Earth. You don't think that we know the one-way speed of light, which gives us, things about the universe and how far away stars are and how old the universe is and, all that. So, I mean, you're throwing out biology, astrophysics, evolution. You're throwing out huge chunks of science and then saying, I love science.
No, I'm not, actually. What you just did there was equivocate your understanding of science with what science actually is. So evolution is not science, right? I'm not saying that scientists don't do evolution. I'm saying evolution doesn't equal science, right?
Well, I'm not saying that is the whole
Right,
body
but
of
if you,
science.
but if you immediately say you believe in science, or you say that you love science, but then you don't believe in evolution, you don't believe in this, you don't believe in that, the implication there is that these things are science and you reject them. And so therefore you don't actually believe in science. I do believe in the scientific method, and I have a justification for using it, and that I can trust, because God upholds the universe with the power of his word, that the seasons are going to be the same and that things are going to continue forward, and that I can trust that an experiment is going to have meaning tomorrow the same way it had meaning today, the same way it had meaning yesterday, right? And that's all because God exists and because that happens. Unfortunately, the atheist worldview doesn't give you that kind of justification. So in that respect, I'm like, well, I'm the one who's actually got a foundation to believe in science, because I can actually give you a foundation as to why I should expect those things.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's interpretation of data. We were talking about the one-way speed of light. It's just like it's an unknown, and as long as the round-trip speed of light that you use is the same, you can put actually an infinite number of speeds in there. Now, some are helpful, some are not.
Yeah.
But that's the difference between. So when someone says, we know how far away stars are not by the speed of light. We know how far away they are based on other things, but that's how we determine the age of the universe, because we go, well, that star's 13.8 billion years old, right? Well, that's good data. That's measurable. That's really accurate. Or 13.8 billion years old. It's 13.8 billion years light years away. That's good, accurate measurement. That's good science, right? Then we go, and light travels this fast, so therefore it took light this long to get there. That's actually not known. That's actually a hole. You know what I mean? And so if you believe, it's okay if you assume the convention that the speed of light is the same in all directions. It's okay if you assume that. You just have to know that you're making a huge assumption, and I think it's fair to present it that way. That's what I think when it comes to worldviews. And I think what you see when people don't present it that way is their worldview sort of interrupting their worldview determining the way they understand data, right? That's why I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I don't agree, but I understand that that's your point of view. So
to also ask the same question to you, science again, is this important in your worldview? Why is it important in your worldview?
Yeah, to me, it's extremely important, and it's our best way of understanding the world around us, quite simply, in many different facets. In whether you're talking about whatever field of science you're talking about, it's our best way of understanding the world.
So then, just because I feel like we've warmed you all up enough now I'm going to hit some hard-hitting questions. So we'll start with you, Gary. If you had to pick one, I know you might have a few. I know you might have a few too, Aaron, but I want to go with one to start. What would you say is the number one thing you have a problem with when it comes to Aaron's worldview? The number one thing you can think of that you disagree with. You think he's just flat wrong. Don't worry, Aaron, you'll get time.
I'm prioritizing, yeah. So me and Aaron, we spend a lot of time together hashing these things out. We disagree very regularly. We get together several times a week for lunch or coffee or just to get together and have fun, but we also started a podcast together where we get together and constantly go through these things. So what's the number one thing about Aaron's worldview? Probably the young earth thing is the thing that's most troubling. I feel like if we could get past that, then we could start having discussions about morality and the message of Jesus and why people need to be saved or not, or it would just go a lot. We could go to some other places, but I do get hung up on, man, I just can't believe that you think that this is a young earth. It's only been around for 6,000 years. So we spend a little bit of time. We spend a little bit of time there, but that's probably the biggest one for me.
Okay. And do you real quick, do you think that's a consequence of his worldview in
Absolutely.
your eyes, or do you think that's what drives the worldview that he has?
Oh, if it's a consequence or a driver? I don't think it's a driver of his. I think it's a consequence of his worldview. Okay. I don't think that determines it, but it's the position that he's in, believing those things.
Yeah.
So,
Aaron, what is your number one gripe with Gary's worldview? What is he absolutely flat wrong on?
yeah.
Well, I'll just piggyback on what Gary was saying there. It 100% is worldview driven. My positions are definitely start theological, and as far as the young earth goes, I started with the question, if the Bible's true and the earth was created 6,000 years ago, then science should support that, right? So science isn't the arbiter of truth. It's not the ultimate standard. The Bible is. So if the Bible is true, then it should be supported by science. So that's what made me start digging into this. Is it even reasonable to believe the age of the earth is young, besides just committing to like a theological position? So yes, it's worldview driven. I'm not arguing with that. As far as I think that you take things for granted. I think that I think that it's just like, hey, this is the way it is. I can rely on my senses. Logic is there. The earth is old. I can trust scientists, and it's just like you just take things for granted. And you can grind a conversation to a halt by just being like, well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that? Well, right? Yeah. So you just I have to like let it be granted. And then when I'm like, oh, that's too far, let's not let that be granted. Let's dig in a little bit. But I would say that's the one thing that things get taken for granted. Assumed.
Would you agree that that is a consequence of Gary's worldview or a driver of it?
Yeah, no, I think it's a consequence. I think that these things, I think the things he believes start with his worldview, and to him they're so obvious they don't need to be justified. But the truth is, if you're not justifying it, then it's irrational to believe it,
So just because we've never had this particular question posed to us, right? Could I give me a couple of examples of stuff that I'm just assuming? I mean, I know that I haven't measured the speed of light, and I haven't done radiometric dating myself, and those kind. Is that the kind of stuff you're talking about? That I trust science, or what else? What else am I assuming that I shouldn't?
Well, this is going to take us into the one conversation that puts us into an argument.
Are you getting ready to go all?
We do have some.
Are you getting ready to go all abstract on us?
Yeah. Okay.
Are you going abstract?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's our fifth graders. So.
Yeah, no. So
just the paragraph headings. It's like what am I assuming?
Okay, so the things in science, I think there are a lot of things that are assumed in science. But how about that evidence has meaning outside of, or evidence even has meaning within your worldview? I think that's a topic that I think should be explored that hasn't been explored. Right.
So I'm assuming that evidence has meaning. I'm assuming that.
Yeah. Right. Just the fact that you're not justifying it immediately, I think is like just evidence that it needs to be hashed out in your head, right? Because if you ask me, why does evidence have meaning? I can say, well, because God gave me senses that are basically reliable so that I can know him. That way I can trust my senses. So I know I can trust my senses because if I couldn't trust them, I couldn't know him. And from there, I now have a platform for which I can spiral out into the world and start to engage it, right?
Yeah, but if I don't have a God, that means that if I'm presented with a piece of evidence, that I shouldn't take it for what it is as evidence of a thing?
That's exactly what taking it for granted is. It's just that like it is what it is, and that we don't have to explain why it is that. Does that make sense, or am I just?
You're just. But hey, it's okay.
Right?
Well,
Yeah.
I think this might lead us to
maybe
I
another.
want to change one of my answers. The
Maybe
most
he has good-
aggravating thing about Aaron is when he goes all abstract, and I can't even understand what he's saying. So
Maybe you have good probing questions that can help that. But.
So, Gary,
Yeah.
I think this brings us up to a point, and of course, Aaron, I'll bring this back to you as well. Are there things in your worldview that you don't have answers for?
yeah.
Is that a problem?
No, I don't have an answer for what was before the Big Bang. I don't have an answer for how did life begin in the primitive stages. There's a lot of things that I don't have an answer for, but I don't think that that's a problem. We're still working on a lot of things, and I think that's the beauty and the challenge of still being curious and still seeking answers. That pursuit is valuable. So the fact that we don't know something, that's not a problem at all. It just means we've still got work to do, and it's a task for tomorrow, and it's what keeps us moving forward. So yeah, there's things I don't know, but I'm totally fine with it. I like it. That's what gives you the wonder and the awe, and it gives you something to go seek answers about. So I actually enjoy the I don't know.
Aaron, are there things your worldview doesn't have an answer for?
No.
And
I'm a Christian. I've got it all. Yeah, no, there's obviously things I don't know. Do I think that Christianity can answer, all of the relative questions about life? Yes. He said that he thought science was the best way to understand the world. I happen to completely disagree. I think it's a tool for a very specific thing, which is just understand this physical world that we live in. But I don't think it answers the most important questions. I think you get that from theology, philosophy, and ethics. I think that answers the real question, which is why? What are we doing? Like, what does it mean to know you and to bump around in the world, right? I mean, we look to science for very few things. I mean, obviously it makes, you able to drive to work, but I think the why is the real question, right? I don't know that anybody is having this existential angst as a teenager because they don't know the angular momentum of the tires on their car. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the best tool for understanding the world. There are things that I don't know, especially with science. I mean, there's obviously limitations to what we can know with science. But I think that Christianity answers a lot of questions that need answering really the most,
I mean, I get that, and I understand what you're saying. I mean, science is not going to make me appreciate poetry or love or any of those things, and those things also go a long way to make life worth living. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. I don't think that a belief in the supernatural helps you necessarily in any of those either, but.
I mean, it does.
But I do agree with you in that science isn't all that there is.
Yeah. So I think, and this is another flaw I think in. I'm going to use terms like atheist thinking or atheist ideology, but I'm really trying to paint a broad brush, and I know everybody's not the same. Just like I can't speak for all Christians, I'm not painting everyone with a broad brush. But things that are consistent with the atheist worldview. And now I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay. Elliot's got another question, I'm sure.
I do actually, because you brought up something that I think is really good, and
I've thought of it. Can I say it?
No,
okay.
Please interrupt me. Go.
So I think there's this idea that we understand the world and we can do science and we can do all these things, and sure there's things that we don't understand, but adding God to it doesn't help anything. We don't need to do that, and I actually think it's the opposite. I think that Christianity gives you a worldview that allows you to make sense of all of the things that are happening in the world, and both through science or philosophy or ethics or whatever it is, and then you take God out of it, and it all just falls apart. irrational and untenable, and you're trying to put all these pieces together, and then look back at me and say, I don't need God to fix that. I can do this on my own. But the problem is that you pulled God out of the equation. It's not me trying to solve an unsolvable equation by just throwing God in. It's you've created a world with problems you can't solve because you pulled God out. That's how I would say it.
And it sounds like, again, we've found ourselves in this place where both of you in your worldview have this space not only for science but also for some of these things that are these kind of intangibles we're not really positive about, love, the meaning, the purpose, and so forth. I guess always a good question, especially if both of you are trying to put your position out there. I guess, what does your worldview offer for those questions? Like when it comes to the atheist side of it, the non-religious side of it, how is that question of purpose being answered? How is that question of love being answered? And the same for you, Aaron. What is it about your biblical worldview that gives you something to kind of rest on and feel comfortable with? If you want to go first, we can go to Gary next.
When you're a Christian, I have answers to questions that atheists can't answer, which is, where did I come from, why am I here, and where am I going, right? Immediately within the first 5 minutes of being a Christian. And I think those are really important questions, and it gives us a foundation. That gives me a foundation to then go into the world and engage it, to know how to treat somebody and why I should treat somebody properly. What is appropriate behavior? What is a proper way to understand science, right? It gives me a framework that allows me to make sense of the world. And it's not just an assertion. I actually would invite anyone to try to untangle that for me, to try to show me that it doesn't give me a consistent, reliable worldview system to know how to engage, different situations. I actually don't understand how atheists bump around the world the way they do.
Right. Well, because we don't have a supernatural, something outside of ourselves to go to for a moral code or what's the right way to live, it puts the responsibility on us to figure out how to treat people well, how to get along with people, how to have empathy and compassion, and like I said earlier, it makes this time so much more valuable. And instead of being relieved of responsibility, it puts the responsibility on us. So, for instance, say I do you wrong, right? Well, I don't have the luxury of saying, last week, I was really terrible to Aaron, but I'm going to pray about that and I'm going to ask for forgiveness. And now I feel better about that, even though Aaron doesn't feel any better about that. I don't have that luxury. Instead, it's up to me to repair the relationship, and I have to put in the work and go to you and ask you for your forgiveness, and I don't get any sort of good feeling from anywhere else. So it puts the responsibility on us. Whereas I think it would be nice sometimes to have some Heavenly Father or anybody else that I can go to and seek forgiveness, and then 10 minutes later, now I feel better about it. So.
Yeah, I don't have the luxury of just asking God for forgiveness and forgetting about you either, though. I still got to make it right with you. Actually, God told me to go.
Right, we're both in the same position as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
But just you have this one other level of
because He told me to go make it right with you first, then come to Him, right? That being said, this is an example of something I think that's just taken for granted. That without God, if you remove God from the question, then we're all just going to default to this sort of rational well-being of others. Everybody's sort of working towards the same goal.
No,
and
but
that's the default state.
That's not at all the assumption. That's not, and the opposite is also not true. Just because you put God in everybody's life doesn't mean that they're going to behave well either. I think that history has shown that to be true.
No, but what I'm saying is that...
And people without God are not necessarily going to behave well either. It's still up to each and every one of us. And having God or not, that changes nothing about the overall scenery.
Well, we have not experienced the world without God, right? So that's actually a really important point. And so all of the ethics that we have in this country are based on, in the West really, are based on the Christian ethic. And so it's crazy to think you can just pull that out and everyone's just going to default to the exact same thing, but we just don't need God.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think you're smuggling something in. Nobody said anybody was going to default to the exact same thing.
no, that's what you say. That's the assumption when you go, well, hey, it's it's on us and we're going to figure it out and we're going to work towards this goal and that's the implication, is that we're all going to jump on board together, as if total self-serving, narcissistic, I'm going to take everything I can take from you every minute of every day isn't a completely rational way to live if we just take God out of the question. You might not like it, but it's a completely rational way to live.
Yeah, I think this is the way that the religion teaches people to think about people that believe differently than they do.
No, I'm saying if you remove God from the situation, you do think like me. You think like me, and I think this is evidence of atheism being not true. You think like me because God exists, right? Because you take all this sense of morality that you have, you just take it for granted that random processes over billions of years, God knows how many accidents, would just bring us all to this point where we are accessing reason, which we don't even know what that, I mean, we'd have to define that in this conversation, but in a materialist worldview, I mean, your brain and my brain aren't necessarily reasoning the same, but then we would all come to the same conclusion, and we're all just going to work together. And I think that's naive because it's all based on God at the beginning. That's what all this morality is based on.
I remember one of the first times I told somebody that I was an atheist, and they looked at me with shock and said, I just can't believe it. But, I mean, you're such a good person. And I'm like, yeah, I don't need anything outside of me to tell me to do good.
I would disagree with that. I would say not giving God the glory is different than not needing him.
Yeah.
If we can, because I think this is a good, segue back to it. We got your answer about, what your worldview provides in terms of those questions: love, meaning, hope, purpose. Gary, I don't know if we got your answer on that. What would you say that
I'll wrap that up.
Atheist worldview provides in that front?
Well, as far as meaning and purpose, that's up to each person to, I can set my life course and give myself a purpose and something that I'm shooting for. The time that I spend with people, things that I learn from them, things that I can teach them, it gives my life meaning. So we decide for ourselves meaning and purpose, and we don't need anything outside of ourselves to establish that for us. And I think it would be a terrible situation if we did. If I thought that there was somebody out there that had a plan for my life and had already dictated, the path that I was going to go, and I didn't have the freedom to decide for myself what I was going to do, I don't think that I would enjoy that at all.
So can I push on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you say that we all create meaning for ourselves. Well, what happens when the meaning I create for myself is to take from you relentlessly whenever I can? What can you say to that? You can't say anything. You can go, well, shoot, I wouldn't do that, or maybe I'll avoid Aaron because he takes from me whenever he can, but you can't criticize me for it. You can't chastise me. I mean, I am the creature I evolved to be, right?
Right. Yeah, I disagree with that. I mean,
this is why I say, sorry, I cut you off, but I just want to wrap this up. This is what I mean by take it for granted. Just take it for granted that we're all going to just jump into this ethic together and do it. And I don't see it. I don't see the foundation for that.
So you've often asked me, without a God, without a creator, if we're all just an unplanned mass of molecules, what right does this unplanned mass of molecules have to tell another unplanned mass of molecules what to do? And I've heard you say that before, and it basically goes back to an origins story. You have an origin story. I don't buy it. I have an origin story. You don't buy it. So in the end, here we are. Whether yours is right or mine is right, regardless. In the end, here we are. And we have to figure out a way to create a society and live together and work. So we make laws. We We vote on things. If everybody in this room right now walked outside to discover that there had been some terrible disaster and the rest of the continent had all just, somehow floated away or something like that, and we were what's left, right? Then we would have to make decisions. We would have to decide who's going to do what actions are appropriate, and all that kind of stuff. And so we have to do that. Whether your story is right or mine is right, we do decide for ourselves what is the best way to conduct ourselves. And I wouldn't want to live under any theocracy or religious law or any of that.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily advocating for a theocracy, but again, we jump into this idea that, again, we just take it for granted that we're all going to work together. What did you say at the beginning? You said that what was the first thing you said leading into this?
Origin stories?
Oh, yeah. So, hey, look, I know you believe that God created you in his image, and that's why people have value. I believe in evolution. Honestly, I'm not being cheeky here. I don't know what gives people value. But, hey, we can just put all that away and just step into this neutral place where we're all going to make laws together. I'm saying that's impossible. That's not possible. There is no neutrality. You have your worldview. I have my worldview. We don't ever step into the same world and just make laws together, right? And the assumption that in the absence of God, I mean, you can just look at this world today, this country today, the way it's divided politically, as if we would all come together, I think is just naive. It's
Yeah, I think what we've seen throughout history is exactly what you would see if there was no God. You would have people trying to figure it out. You would have people believing in certain gods.
I don't know what you would base that off of. I mean, what world have you witnessed where this has happened before that you would base it off of? It's conjecture.
I'll say it again. When you look back through human history and all the different gods that we've created and all the different, it's exactly what you would expect if there was no God. You'd have people trying to figure it out the best way they can as they go along. They would invent thousands of gods over time. Some of them some of those religions would gain some power, some would not. They would have crusades. They would slaughter each other over their gods.
I don't know what.
It's exactly what you would expect if there was no God.
I don't know what grounds you. Well, I don't know what grounds you say that on, but I could just make the exact same argument and say that's exactly what you would expect.
It's been a lot of chaos all the way along, and we have made it better. None of the other gods have made any improvement.
Well, I would say that's
and when
not
left
true.
to the religious, it becomes a bloodbath.
That's like a really gross, unfair characteristic of religion. Religion is not a bloodbath. It's not a continuous bloodbath. I mean, well, I'll hold that thought, but I could make the exact same argument. I could say, look, if the Bible is true, or since the Bible is true, the world we see is exactly what you would expect to see if Romans 1 is true. Because people know who God is, but they suppress that truth in unrighteousness, and instead they create gods in this world made after their own image, and birds and animals and creeping things, to the point that rebellion is so deep that they hurt themselves, right? That's what Romans says. So I can make the same argument. So I don't know where you come off saying this is what you would expect.
Are we fighting?
Are
we fighting?
well, since we are getting to a spicy point, I want to try and just push that a little bit more for you guys. You are here. We want to entertain you, right? But just a reminder, we are coming up to the Q&A section. We do have a microphone and somebody that will walk around and hand you the microphone so that you can ask your question. So please be thinking of those really good questions. But it does feel like we've kind of gotten to a point where there's some tension between the worldviews, as we were kind of expecting. But I guess this is where I want to ask you both, and I have a follow-up, but I'll save it as a surprise. But should we try to change other people's worldviews? It sounds like both of you very much have your point of view, your kind of this is how I move about, and I think generally we think it's right? Otherwise it probably wouldn't be our worldview. So yeah, is
is it something we should be doing, trying to alter other people's worldviews? Gary, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I can't say I've ever really thought about it a lot. I would say if they feel burdened in some way, for instance, for a Muslim woman living under a theocracy, having to remain veiled, not able to access education, not able to leave the house without a male member of the family, I would put in some work to change the worldviews in that town and in that area. I would do that.
But don't we all create meaning for ourselves?
As long as people are treating each other well and not exerting power over other people, then I don't feel a need necessarily to go out and convince people that there's no God or to think about things differently and love people, treat people right, do your best. If that's what's happening, fine. If you're abusing people or if you're exerting undue power over someone else, yeah, I would fight against that.
So it sounds like you're saying yes in certain circumstances, and that line you've kind of laid out is this harm principle.
Yeah, I'm not going to try to go stop people from helping and benefiting people. I will go out and try to stop people from abusing and taking advantage of and persecuting people. Absolutely.
Aaron, do you think we should change people's worldviews?
Well, real quick, I want to push back on that. I mean, if I'm a Muslim man, I am doing the best I can for my wife by making sure that she remains veiled, because then I don't have to worry about prying eyes of other men or her getting into situations. Plus, she's honoring this code in the Quran. And I don't know where you would come off if you just literally said everyone makes their own meaning. I don't know where you come off telling someone else who has found meaning in these expressions that they ought not do that.
Right. I mean, it's a good challenge. I mean, if they're both happy in the situation,
Even if one's not happy.
Yeah. We say even if everybody's not happy?
I mean, why is happiness required for someone? This is what I'm talking about, taking for granted. Well, the well-being of others. Well, we just take for granted what the well-being of others means.
Someone's suffering does enter into the equation for me. So if somebody's suffering in the equation, then I do feel if I had the ability to step in and ease someone's suffering, I feel like I would do that.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't just say, "Hey, y'all are living according to your code, so it's great for you, but it sucks for you." So I don't know if that I would just leave that situation.
It's still more taken for granted, because the assumption there is that I'm going to just jump on the same side as you and go, well, yeah, dude, suffering, let's all go end suffering, but I'm going to press it and say why. On what grounds would you feel that you have any right to step into anyone else's situation as they're just bumping around the world the way they evolved to do it?
Yeah, I would just say empathy, compassion, human well-being.
Why
all those things are reasons to alleviate suffering.
Why,
if possible?
Why?
I don't know. It's like, eventually, it's like the kid. Well, why this and why that and why that, and you can keep going all the way back. And I think where my basis is empathy, compassion, well-being. That's my basis right there.
Right. So you don't feel like you need to justify this, but I think you actually pointed out a really good point, and I think this is a huge problem with the atheist worldview, is you are in an infinite regress of not being able to justify the way you actually behave in the world. It's one thing to say
it's not an infinite regress. I've established a basis. I'm gonna place my basis right here. I don't have to keep going back.
Well, then all you've done is this is just a circular argument. It is what it is because it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, that's literally what the infinite regress is. Like, you're just stopping here arbitrarily, but arbitrariness is irrational. So you see what I'm saying? Like, in that system, you have no right to tell me, because you've arbitrarily picked the well-being of others as defined by you as the way we all ought to act. You have no reason to tell me that I ought to follow along with you.
I mean, look, if they find joy in their suffering and they want to stay there, more power to them.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, what if they find joy in causing the suffering?
Yeah, that's
on what basis do you?
Yeah, based on my worldview, that's not okay.
Yeah, and I would say, as also an accident of evolution. What's my brain got to do with your brain?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, we all have to be here
But-
together, and that's where we go into. We make laws.
But in a Christian worldview,
We need to work together.
In a Christian worldview, I'm not stuck in that. See, I can appeal to it, and I can go, oh, I know it's wrong. It's wrong because God created us in his image, and he said we have value, and he told us how we ought to treat each other, right? And so now I'm not stuck in that. I have a grounding in this ultimate justification for these things, right? So
to circle back around, because we got Gary's
who
answer.
are you again?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Honestly, I'm really just window dressing at best. So do you think that we should change others' worldviews? Do you think
100%.
we should try?
Yeah, 100%. I believe in absolute truth. I think it's obvious, right? Because to deny absolute truth is to affirm it. So I think that there is, and I think we should always be moving towards what's true. So, we were talking on the podcast the other day about religious expression in schools and the public squares, and Gary was saying, well, so it'd be okay for them to have a Christian thing in school, but not a Muslim thing. And yeah, if I think Islam is not true, I'm never going to be encouraging us to move towards something that is not true, right? So in that case, yeah, I think we should be trying to change each other's minds and conform to what is actually true.
Yeah, but you only consider your God to be true. So
Well-
if anybody worships any other God and they are 100% confident, wholehearted, I believe this is true, but it's different than your God, where do we go? If I've got two people, I've got a Christian and I've got, somebody else with a different God, how do we establish which one's?
Okay, so I think this flows from the
Because
world.
they're just as fervent as you.
Well, right. I think this flows from the worldview of science is the best way for us to know the world. And so the implication there is that science is the only place you can find true and false things, and that philosophy and theology and ethics, it's a matter of opinion, and everybody's opinion is equal. I don't agree with that at all. I think that passion for something doesn't make it truer or less true if you're not passionate about it. And I think that what I'm saying is not just an assertion. I know that it sounds like an assertion when I'm just up here and I don't have, a 2-hour lecture to lay out my whole worldview for you, but it's not an assertion, it's an argument. I invite anybody to challenge it. And if the question is, how do you assert your God over another God? I say, take the position of the other person. Take the position of a Muslim, and let's examine Islam. And then you can examine me from the Muslim worldview, and I'm sure that my worldview will stand up. Right? Now, it's a lot of work to do. We never get there. This is as far as we get.
It sounds like you want everybody to go out and get a doctorate in theology before they can determine which one's true.
No, but I do expect them to think out the implications of what they believe.
So you definitely think a Christian should push their worldview and attempt to forward that worldview on others, right?
Well, so that's sort of a...
what was your question?
The question was, should we try to change others' worldviews? Although
As a
Gary,
Christian.
yeah, you might have read my mind a little. My surprise question for both of you, once you said yes, was how do we do that? So I think that's where you're going.
Bloodbath.
So you definitely think the Christians should do that, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, but not the way you said it. That was a question-begging epithet there. You were like, you believe that you should go out and force your beliefs on
Well, I
everybody.
didn't mean it like that.
Okay.
I've got somewhere I'm going with this. So
Okay.
You definitely think that Christians should push their worldview, right?
Yeah, I think Christians should share the gospel with people and try to convince them that Christ is the King of Kings.
Okay.
That's what I believe.
Do you think a Hindu or Muslim or Buddhist or Sikh
You can ignore them.
should do the same? Do you think
What?
they should? Do you think they should?
Oh, I
push
think
their
they should do
worldview?
whatever's consistent with their worldview. I think that's what everyone does anyways. So do I think they should be quiet and stay home? No. But do I think we need to entertain every idea that comes across in the sake for the under the banner of freedom, or for the good fight that is freedom? We just expose ourselves to anything and everything? No, I don't think that necessarily follows. I think if you believe what you think is true. We said this the other day in the car. I believe everything I say is true. I'm not saying I'm infallible. I'm saying if I say it, I believe it to be true. I don't say things that I don't believe to be true. So
I get that.
right. So I'm not putting what I say just on equal footing with everybody. Now there are. I'm not saying I'm smarter than everybody either. I'm saying I'm discerning.
Okay.
So we're coming up on the last couple of minutes, but real quick for both of you, once again, just to kind of round us out, since we've talked so much about each of your individual worldviews and where there's overlap and clash, I always think a really good question in this moment is, are you willing to change your worldview? Are you open to that? And what, if you have anything, what would it take to do that? Aaron, if you don't mind going first, and we'll end with Gary, and then we'll go to y'all for questions.
This is okay. This one takes a little explaining. So
You got 30 seconds.
State the question again, I'll say it in a way that's not going to please anybody. But go ahead, state the question one more time.
Yeah, are you willing to change your worldview? And if you have anything that you can think of, what would change your worldview, basically?
No, I'm not willing to change my worldview. And the reason for that is because I believe that without the Christian God, we can't make sense of this world. I believe that the possibility that God doesn't exist is not there. So I would say that especially looking at atheism, now I guess maybe I would have more compassion towards like another theistic religion, or maybe even Buddhism, which is kind of a pseudo non-theistic religion. It's a little bit weirder. But to me, atheism doesn't reflect our lived experience in any way. So if you're asking would I change to atheism, no. But I don't, I think that the Christian worldview is true, and that it's impossible that it's not true. And there's a lot more there to unpack, but that's what it is.
Yeah. Gary, same, just again restate, are you willing to change your worldview? And if so, if you have anything, what would that piece of information or experience or whatever, what would that be to change it, if you are willing?
Yeah, I'm absolutely willing to change my worldview. I think it's a misconception about atheists that, one, we're making the declaration that, or making the claim that there is no God. And that's not the case. We are unconvinced. It has not been shown as reasonable and plausible to us. But if we were shown evidence, if it could be demonstrated to me, I mean, what an incredible thing that would be. But it's not like I'm closed to it. I've spent more time in my Bible since becoming an atheist than I did in years before. And that's a common thing with many atheists. We tend to read our Bibles much more than most believers. The thing is, we just don't stay on the verses that they always taught us in Sunday school. We go through the rest of it, and we look at the parts that they don't really want us to look at all that much, and we ask questions that they don't want us to ask. But I'm seeking truth, and I want to believe true things. And so if it was demonstrated to me, you asked what would change my worldview. I don't know. I don't know I don't know if it would be a certain type of miracle. But if a God existed, he would know what would change my mind. And
what if your worldview was just inconsistent? What if your worldview should be the thing that changed your worldview? Because it doesn't make sense, right? Instead of looking for something else to like pull you in, examine your worldview, and you'll find that it's just lacking. No?
Yeah,
that wouldn't convince you?
Well, first,
at least to change?
I don't really understand what you just said, which happens often when you try to speak from my perspective and then ask me a question.
I'll tell you what you meant to say.
I think that is always, it's always good to end these on us kind of, having a little bit of fun with each other and laughing, because again, truly, I think anytime I watch the two of you engage with each other, it is obvious how much you guys care about each other and are interested in understanding each other's worldview, even if we did kind of technically end on a bit of confusion. But we thank
not
you
uncommon.
both so much. Will you guys give them a round of applause for being up here? Truly wonderful. Seriously, you guys always embody exactly what we're going for here with Conversation Coalition, I think. You know?
Well, and I just want to tell everybody, Aaron and I get together several times a week to do just this. Today we had lunch. Saturday we'll be doing a podcast. We're on the phone together every day. We regularly challenge each other back and forth. We have a lot of fun with it. We pose tough questions to each other, but we absolutely enjoy getting together. We enjoy working together. And I would encourage anybody from either side, if you don't have somebody that has an opposing worldview that you get with regularly and challenge each other, it's good for you. And I think that you should do it. It helps you nail down what you think and why, and it gives you the ability to challenge somebody else's beliefs. So if you don't, I'm thankful that I've got Aaron that I can challenge, and I've got him to challenge me. I would encourage everybody to go out and find something like this, so where you can sit around and do this all the time. So
Yeah, we are a bunch of nerds that really just love doing this.
That's
so.
true.
And we now are going to turn it over to y'all, because one of the big things that we want to instill is exactly what Gary was kind of just saying about how we want y'all to be a part of it. So who's got a question? Our wonderful Miss Sydney right there has a microphone. So when you get the microphone, tell us who you are, and then state your question. It's not a rambling thing like you're seeing me doing right now. It is a handful of words that end in a question mark. So,
Also, I think the perfect trailer for what we do would be just to take Aaron's question and then zoom in on Gary's face, and then just end credits like anyway.
is that
Bill from Murfreesboro. Quick hypothetical. If your worldview is wrong, would you want to know?
are you asking me or Aaron?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Yeah, but this I hate to just say this in a quick answer because it takes some unpacking, but
Yes or no, Aaron?
yeah, no, it's I believe that it's impossible for it to not be true, if that makes sense. Yeah. Well, you're asking me to. Right, you're asking me to like imagine a hypothetical world where this worldview might not be true, and I'm just telling you that I can't. So, yeah, where it's not true. Does that answer maybe in a roundabout way?
Yeah, I would absolutely want to know, and I find myself questioning why I believe what I believe about a variety of topics. Some of those you bring to my attention, and then I spend some time in study, and why do I think that? So I'm thankful for the challenge that you give to me. But in answer to your question, I would absolutely want to know.
Great question.
Individual issues within my worldview. Yeah, I would say that. Individual issues within my worldview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elliot, what about you? Would you want to be wrong?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
If you found out, or would you want to know if your worldview were incorrect? Mm-hmm. Me too.
Yes.
Me too. I'm right about everything, though. So
Yeah, you're good on everything. So.
Thank you, Gene Wisdom from Bellevue. Got a question for Aaron. As a Protestant myself, a Baptist, one thing that I'm finding I'm becoming more troubled about for myself as a Protestant is the multiplicity of sects within Protestantism. Mm-hmm. How do you, as far as arriving at the truth of Christianity, how do you pick and choose, and who's to say the other's wrong with the same Bible, and different sects getting all kinds of different answers out of that?
Yeah, so I believe that God has given his message clearly, and that what has been revealed to us has been revealed clearly, and that we can know it. And I mean know with a capital K. Now, we're fallen people, so we don't always get everything right. When you think about denominations, I don't think of denominations as a knock on Christianity. Like-minded people gather. It's just like our nature. And so I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing, you know. I think that it's painted as a bad thing, but I don't know that it's a bad thing. But there are things in the Bible that aren't clear, and I would say they're obviously intentionally unclear. It's not like God accidentally wrote it the wrong way, right? But things that are left to the individual believer to decide what is right for him or her. But I think that denominations just accurately reflect the state of man, which is a fallen world where we're trying to sort out, you know, the truth. But there are truths in the Bible that I think are unequivocally clear, and that we can know those truths. You know, does that answer your question?
What's up? I'm Caleb. I live in Antioch. So when y'all were talking about, sorry, I had to write this down because I'm a scatterbrain. Y'all were talking about early on with evidence.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do with evidence, and what you do with evidence depends on, to a degree, your worldview and generally different biases you have, right? I'm a Christian, but my question for you is this. How do you believe an atheist bias worldview affects their opinions on science? Things like evolution and the age of the earth are generally understood to be contradictory to what the Bible teaches. So I think it's easy to see why a Christian scientist could potentially contort evidence. Not that it happens, but you could see why that could happen. What biases do you think the majority of scientists, specifically the atheists of that bunch, what would persuade them to kind of change evidence or come to different conclusions?
So I'm not accusing anybody of changing evidence or intentionally being dishonest. What I'm saying is that if you start with a specific presupposition, which is, let's say that the earth is old, because to be honest with you, the idea that the earth was old predated the ability to date rocks, and I use that term loosely, but to be able to estimate the age of rocks. So when they came into the world of estimating the age of rocks, we already had this presupposition that the world was old. But as I start to date a rock, my presuppositions, I already am committed to an old earth. So, like I said, the formula for radiometric dating has 4 variables. We don't know the initial conditions. We don't know that it was a closed system. And we don't know there's 2 isotopes. There's a parent isotope and a daughter isotope that we're measuring. We don't know how much of the parent there was originally. We don't know how much of the daughter there was originally. And we don't know that it's a closed system, right? But as an atheist, if I have a presupposition that the world is old, then I'm going to fill in the blanks with things that are consistent with that presupposition, right? And so then that's going to give me a particular answer. And so people will ask, well, we can use these techniques to understand the age of rocks and then, you know, go find oil and understand the world. Well, if I have consistent presuppositions, I'm going to get consistent answers even if my presuppositions are wrong, right? If I always put the wrong value in for X, I'm going to get consistent answers with that incorrect answer. Does that make sense? But it does.
You don't have to just tell him sure like that. I mean,
I mean, did that make sense? Right? With evolution, there's a presupposition with presupposition with science that things start simple and build in complexity, right? Idea of the way things are. Why, when the Big Bang happened, did the world have to start off in the simplest elements that then became more complicated, right? Where does that come from? Why is evolution doesn't even just the theory of origins, it's the theory of everything in science. Why is that? It's not like it's something that's observed, right? It's based on a presupposition. Oh, the earth is old, or the universe is old, right? So.
Hey, my name's Patrick up in Hendersonville. Great job, both of you, and questions to both of you. Tell me if I'm understanding your perspective correctly. one of you saying, Gary, you're saying that we don't know the answers, but we follow the evidence, do the best we can. If I'm understanding you correctly, Aaron, you're saying there is an absolute truth, and I know it. Which one of those two worldviews would you say plays better with other worldviews?
Well, I'm going to, just based on the comments on TikTok, I'm going to say your worldview.
So when me and Aaron and I first met because he put a message on Meetup that said, "I'm a Christian. All my friends are Christian. I live in an echo chamber. I want to have a sit down with somebody that doesn't share my worldviews." And of course, I answered and said, "I'm here for you." And we've been going at it ever since. We put out, and he said his motivation for doing that was to see if his ideas worked in the marketplace of ideas. We've recently begun putting out videos of he and I disagreeing, and all of the comments are attacking Aaron. Not one person has come at me.
Nothing.
So your question, how do they work and play well with others? We're seeing evidence of that right now.
Yeah.
Everybody's piling on you.
I think it does. I think what he says reflects the culture in America today. I think we're progressively moving towards secularism. Whether that's good or bad will probably remain to be seen.
Well, it's not just America. I think Canada and the UK are also piling on you. So
Okay.
You
And piling on me?
Yeah.
On TikTok? Dang it. But I also, so it probably doesn't play well with others, but then again, truth doesn't play well with others. It is what it is, right? And then from a theological standpoint, we're not really called to go out in the world and play nice with others on these topics. We're called to stand for the truth. Jesus didn't go into a town and meet people and go, "You know what you ought to do? You ought to go explore every possible option, and if you think that in the end I'm the right choice, you should come back to me and talk to me." He said, just turn away from all that and turn to the truth, right? And so I try to be consistent in that, and I try to be to represent that mindset. You know what I mean? A long time ago, I stopped qualifying what I said. Well, from my point of view, from what I think, because that's like a trap door for me to say the world's a buffet of ideas, just pick what you want. But I don't believe that, right? So I quit talking like that because I don't believe it.
See, when I post clips of Aaron and I on the internet, people just say, "Why are y'all's eyes so buggy?"
Dude, don't know. They were getting after me about
They were.
Calvinism.
But they're like, like people just put the eye emoji in the comments. That's it, just like the eye emoji.
No.
Hello, I'm Jacelyn, and I'm from Nashville. I've heard some stuff, and I guess the topic is really like worldview. I'm a trans woman, and I was wondering, and I'm also, like, I've been a terrible kid, dealing with that process of, like, admitting it to myself. I'm just wondering when I should be expected to get taken to the edge of town and stoned, and, like, all of the kind of things that aren't acceptable to maybe someone else's worldview, because I used to be Christian, and my life's a lot better since I've progressed. So I'd like to hear from everybody on stage of, like, when should I get stoned?
Hey, you good. Tell her when to get stoned.
When I was a believer, everybody else that wasn't part of my tribe, so to speak, was the others, and it was the entire LGBTQ community, and people that listen to different kind of music, people that but everybody that wasn't in our tribe was the others, and we were not to associate with and that kind of thing. Since leaving all that behind, I've been so much more curious about other people's challenges, other people's journeys. I don't know what it's like to walk in your shoes. I imagine it would be very challenging. You would have hurdles that I haven't experienced yet, but I'm curious about them, and I'd love to spend some time in conversation with you and just get to know you a little bit better. And in answer to your question, you should never be dragged out to the edge of town and stoned, in my opinion. So I'd like to get to know you.
Unless
Well-
it's medical marijuana, in which case.
Still illegal in
Correct.
Tennessee. We do not promote any breaking of laws.
Well, I don't think anyone should be drug out to the edge of town and stoned either. So what I believe you're referencing is our sins in the Old Testament that were punishable by death. But let's just say that those punishments, the actual punishments, were for, like, the actual punishment itself was for that time, right? Those laws were for those people. Now, the principles of the law still stand, so I'm not backing off of that. But I'm not advocating for anyone to be treated any other way than what the laws of this country are. Now, I would encourage us to all be more Christian as we move forward, right? And I'm always encouraging people to be more Christian no matter who they are. As far as you're concerned, if you're asking me a question personally about you, I want people to come alongside you and love you and help you. And, you talked about a difficult journey, and to be supportive of you in that journey. Now, we're probably going to differ on what supportive means, right? But I would encourage you that true happiness in identity and who you are, and this is not directed at you, true happiness in who a person is that happiness isn't going to come like in this ego identity of me. You're going to find that true peace and happiness in Jesus and in identity in Christ. And so that's where I would encourage someone to seek to find that kind of peace. But I don't want anyone to be ostracized or, taken to the edge of town. If that makes sense.
May I ask a question?
You may.
What do you mean by principles? You said you believe in the principles, but not
Say that
punishment.
one more time.
A moment ago, you said you believe in the principles, but not the punishment. And I was just curious what.
Oh, okay. So, like, I could believe that that murder is wrong, but capital punishment maybe isn't the answer to it, right? In other words, so I can believe that sexual sins are wrong, and that that the principle that sexual sins are worthy of the death penalty speaks to how grave sexual sin is. It's not just wink, wink, nudge, nudge, okay? That it's a serious thing. But that doesn't mean that I think people should be drugged to the street and stoned today. What it means is we ought to treat it with that same level of importance and gravity that the death penalty, something that is given the death penalty is of the most important, right? That's why we would, the punishment would be that stiff. So in principle, it's that important.
Can
Does
I
that make
ask one
sense?
more question?
Sure.
Are you a virgin?
Is it obvious?
Well, you talk about sexual sin, so I'm just curious. A lot of the punishment for sexual sin in the Bible is death. And so I was just wondering
Right.
if, like, sex before marriage or sex after marriage or divorce, things like that.
No, no, but I was married. But have I committed sexual sin? Is this the confession part of the day? Yes, and I'm not putting myself over anybody else.
Right.
The difference between me and Gary is that God has had mercy on me and changed me on the inside.
And
It's
Gary
not because
is a
I'm
virgin.
super smart. It's not because this is a Lululemon sweater. It's not because I'm awesome. It's not because I outsmart Gary. It's not because I'm special. It's because he had mercy on me. So all I really want is for God to have that same mercy
Got it.
on other people.
Got it.
Gary, do you want to say any thoughts on that, or?
No.
Okay.
I'm good.
We've got just a couple more minutes, maybe one or two more questions, and then we will, at some point, let you all go home. But yeah, I think we have another one.
Okay, I'll take one. You were talking about your comments on TikTok, how they are mostly anti-Aaron's point of view, and that's just everybody out there. But let's bring it down. What if you were sitting right now in a church, and you knew that 95% of that congregation believed in some form of evolution? Would you, Aaron, then be willing to say to them, all of you Christians out there are wrong on your views of evolution? And if so, how do you think they would feel about your answer?
Yeah, so I wouldn't have any problem saying that. And I think that there are Christians who believe in evolution, and I don't think that a Christian who believes in evolution is not a Christian, okay? You asked before about denominations. There are clear teachings in Scripture. I actually think God creating the earth in 6 days is pretty clear. Like evening and morning the first day, evening and morning the second day. I don't know how he would have said it clear. But what I would challenge someone, a Christian who believed in a Christian who believed in evolution, would be, what are the theological implications of what you believe? If you believe that there was death before Adam sinned, then why does the New Testament tell us that through one man sin entered the world and through sin death, right? Why did Jesus come to die to rescue us from the death that Adam put us into, right? So that's an important thing. Why the whole gospel is based on this backdrop that is Genesis and the story of Adam. And if you take that away, Jesus rising from the dead doesn't have any meaning unless we see the context. Which was what?
How do you think they would feel about it?
Oh, that they should be more like me. I'm just kidding. No, I think that worldview commitments also get attached to the ego, and so that I think that people probably feel hurt. Not that they would start crying or anything, but feel like a pain when you have something you're committed to and then it's challenged. But I've been through that too, and my worldview has changed when I was challenged, and I thought about things, and I had to let go of, or I felt like I had to let go of the way I used to think about, now specifically about Christianity, but the way I used to think about Christianity, because it was shown to me to be inconsistent. Like this position I was holding made me feel good because I didn't have to put God on, I didn't have to ask any questions about God and evil, but it's inconsistent and indefensible, so I have to give it up, and I have to change to this other worldview that's really hard to deal with. Does that make sense?
I think that was our last question.
Sweet. Well, then I want to say before anybody gets up or starts to move or stops where their head is right now, please understand one of the biggest things that we are trying to do with this organization is we want these questions to be bouncing around in your head for the whole next month. We want for the next 30 days you to be seeking out this type of difficult and nuanced conversation that involves disagreement and clash, but in a way with compassion and, curiosity and just interest. And again, I really do believe these two guys embody that so well. And we want that for y'all to continue in your daily lives. And we want you to come back and bring your friends. Bring somebody here that you think would enjoy this and would value this. And now is the part where I shamelessly plug all the things that I need you to go find and follow online. So you can find us on Facebook and on YouTube at The Conversation Coalition, super duper easy. You can find us on Twitter at Conco Nashville. We have a sign up in the back for our newsletter that gives you these links. We'll send it right to your email, conversationcoalitionnashville@gmail.com. If you want to hit us up, please reach out to us, and not only that, but come up and talk to these guys today. I promise you, I have hung out with them enough to know they never shut up, and they desperately want more people to talk to. So come talk to them, come talk to other people here, make friends. That is what we are about. And seriously, thank you all so much for being here. We greatly appreciate you. What do you want to say?
Can I plug our podcast?
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah.
Talk about your stuff.
So we keep going. We started. It's called the Believe It and Not podcast, right? Believe It and Not. So you can find us on YouTube, but everywhere is just at Believe It and Not on all the social medias. Cool. And if you want to pile on TikTok, let's go,
Yes.
baby.
Yes.
Just remember, he's there.
Thank you all so much.
Steve. Oh, yeah.